Hi, everyone, and welcome to English Digest. I'm Erin.
And I'm Kat.
And we are talking about the sharing economy, Kat.
That's an interesting idea.
So, do you or have you in the past, I guess in the past few years, used any parts of the sharing economy?
In the past few years, I have used sharing economy services in the past few hours. I took an Uber today to go to a place which was too far for me to take the bus in a timely fashion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was just today. I haven't used one today personally, but I traveled to Japan a couple of months ago and I stayed in all Airbnbs. So that is part of the sharing economy as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
So those aren't the only parts of the sharing economy. We're going to get more into what we're talking about, what the sharing economy is, how people use it, and what it means for the future in today's article.
If you've been to a major city in the US, Europe, or Australia recently, you may have seen people whizzing by on stand-up scooters. These little vehicles are part of a new rideshare movement spearheaded by US-based companies Bird and Lime. Ride-sharing is part of a growing system called the sharing economy, based on the sharing of possessions and services via the internet. And the bigger the sharing economy gets, the more companies spring up. These companies have presented a golden opportunity for people with assets and skills to share. Have an unused room or apartment? Rent it to tourists on Airbnb. Want extra gas money? Give people rides with Uber or deliver food for Foodpanda. Providers get the most out of their possessions, and users get the convenience of on-demand service, often at a much cheaper price. The sharing economy is even good for the environment, as it helps people lower their carbon footprint by reusing items. Despite these advantages, the sharing economy has a definite dark side. For example, many people renting out their lodgings on Airbnb break the safety ordinances hotels have to abide by. Shared vehicles, like stand-up scooters and dockless bikes, are often stolen, vandalized, or left in the wrong spots, cluttering public spaces. Governments around the world are scrambling to regulate these companies, and some have ended up banning Uber and similar brands. The solution, economists say, is for policymakers, companies, and consumers alike to do their homework. Responsible regulations, cooperation, and flexible planning are needed to make the sharing economy work as part of the overall economic system. With some sensible steps from all involved, these booming new ideas can lead the way into the future.
All right, so the sharing economy. Not just the sharing economy, but the give and take of the sharing economy.
That's right.
So, in our title, we use the phrase give and take, which is basically just kind of saying how other people help each other in some way. You give something and someone takes it, and that other person gives in another way and someone takes what they have. And it's kind of just the way that people help each other.
Yeah, that's right. It's like a balance of how people can provide things to each other and take things from each other.
Right. And
give
that
and take.
Yeah, and that is the basics of the sharing economy. That's what the sharing economy is. Basically, the sharing economy is like a new economic model that we're seeing. We've been in capitalism, which is an economic model for quite some time now. And this is sort of a newer way that people are using their goods and services and kind of exchanging things and money. So it's often defined as basically between peer-to-peer, called P2P sometimes. So
that's right.
Peer-to-peer just means from regular person to regular person, or people like you to other people like you. That's kind of what that's saying.
Right.
And it's the way that people acquire things, sell things, exchange things, and sort of the platforms that they can do them on. So like Airbnb, Uber, Food Panda, that sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah. I've also heard something called the gig economy, which I think is sort of related, where gigs are like small individual jobs that you take to make up an overall income, like Uber drivers, where they take individual jobs. That's also part of the gig economy.
Right. So some new economic systems that we're seeing in the modern day here. But let's get into the article and find out what other kind of sharing economy companies there are. It says, if you've been to a major city in the US, Europe, or Australia recently, you may have seen people whizzing by on stand-up scooters. So I assume this is probably something we'll see in Taiwan probably in the near future. I mean, we've got the bike services, like the, what are those?
U-bike.
The U-bikes and the O-bikes.
That's right.
That sort of thing. So it's sort of a similar idea, these stand-up scooters. Here, a scooter is not like the scooters that we drive in Taiwan, not like the motor gas scooters, but they're more like, we've seen children kind of play on them here, where you put one foot on a flat little skateboardy kind of thing, like a flat board with 4 wheels, and then you hold on to a handlebar that sticks up and you use one foot to push to move forward.
Yeah, and you can tell it's different because it's called a stand-up scooter. Like, you don't normally stand up on a motorized scooter, but on these, you're basically standing.
Right. And what we're seeing in these cities is we're seeing people whizzing by. Now, what we mean by whiz basically here is that we're just saying that someone is moving really quickly enough to sort of maybe make a rushing sound as you go by. Yep. Sort of thing.
Yeah. So going on with the article, it says, these little vehicles are part of a new rideshare movement spearheaded by US-based companies Bird and Lime. Okay, so we got this thing called rideshare, which is a smaller part of the sharing economy where you have a ride of some kind. It could be a stand-up scooter. It could be what we mentioned before with the U-bikes or the O-bikes. Or it could be a car like Uber or something else.
Lyft.
Yeah, exactly. There are many different ride-share kind of things. And it's just when a company matches a passenger with a driver or with their own vehicle via usually like a mobile app. You guys have probably used these.
All right, so that's also a rideshare movement. That's kind of used rideshare there as an adjective to modify the noun movement. Now, a movement is basically when a group of people who share similar ideas or beliefs sort of get together and work together to achieve a certain goal. So here, what we're saying is that these companies, these rideshare companies, are sort of working together to get people moving in less traditional ways than, say, public transportation or taxis.
And I think it's kind of got a double meaning because you have like a movement as in terms of people sharing the same idea, and they're also moving around on these vehicles.
Play on words. So what do we mean by spearheading something?
Well, spearhead is a kind of figure of speech which means like leading an organized action or leading an attack or leading something like a movement. So if you have a spear, the head is the part that's pointy. It's the part that sticks into whatever it's thrown at. So spearheading means that you're at the front of this movement.
Right.
So these companies, Bird and Lime, are kind of starting the stand-up scooter rideshare kind of thing.
Okay, so you could say other companies like Uber and Lyft spearheaded sort of the rideshare movement in terms of cars, that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, ride-sharing is part of a growing system called the sharing economy, which is based on the sharing of possessions and services via the internet. Now, one note, Kat, when she read the article, said via the internet.
Yeah.
You might have heard me say via the internet. Both pronunciations are okay, so you can choose which way you say it. All right, so we see here that the sharing economy is based on the sharing of possessions and services via the internet. So possessions are basically the things that you own. They could be anything as big as a car or an apartment or a house,
right,
or even an empty room in an apartment, to something as small as your phone is a possession. Your dining room table is a possession.
Yeah.
The bag you carry your things in is a possession. Some of those things you won't share with others, but some of them you can.
Yeah, and also they talk about services you can share, like people who will offer to do chores for you.
Yes.
Like that's another element of the sharing economy. And also we heard this word via or via, as you said. Via or via is kind of like saying by. It's like using a particular person or machine or something to make something else happen.
Right.
So you could say sharing possessions and services via the internet or by means of the internet.
You could also probably say through the internet.
Yes, you could. You could.
All right, so we are talking about this sharing economy. So people are sharing their possessions, their things. They're also sharing the services they can offer through the internet. And it says here, and the bigger the sharing economy gets, the more companies spring up. So what we're saying there in that sentence pattern is just that as something gets bigger, as this sharing economy gets bigger, of course, the more companies that appear. As something grows, this other thing is growing as well.
Right. Like the more comparative this one thing gets, the more comparative this other thing gets. Like the more the merrier is another way we can use that structure.
Right.
Yeah. So this spring up word. So spring up here means kind of like in the way that flowers do. They suddenly appear or they suddenly start to exist. They just pop up like flowers out of the ground. I think that's kind of like spring up.
So it basically just means to appear or suddenly start to be.
Exactly.
Right. So, of course, as an economy gets bigger, the more companies appear. All right, so let's talk about how to take part in the sharing economy. So the second paragraph starts by saying these companies have presented a golden opportunity for people with assets and skills to share.
Okay.
Now, before we start talking about the vocabulary words, we should take a look at that phrase in there, or that idiom, we could say, a golden opportunity.
Sounds very shiny.
Now, a golden opportunity is basically just a good chance for people to get or use something valuable, or basically like a good opportunity to be successful. It's kind of like, oh, this will work perfectly for me.
Yeah.
It's a golden opportunity. It's like I'm striking rich with this gold.
Yeah, it's a very lucky chance that you have to take, and it will reward you a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
So this other vocabulary word we have in this sentence is talking about assets, people with assets and skills to share. So assets is a little bit like possessions. It is also something belonging to somebody or to a business that has the power to earn that person money or has some value to them. So assets could also be something like financial assets, like how much money do you have in the bank? Or your assets could be like a car is your asset because you can earn money by driving people around.
Another good example of an asset is if you speak 2 or 3 languages, your language ability is considered an asset because these languages could help you find jobs more easily.
Yeah, even people themselves could be an asset to their company if they are an indispensable member of their company.
Exactly. So lots of different assets out there that you can make money with, and lots of different skills that people have as well. Not everybody has the same skills. So if you're good at maybe fixing a sink or tuning a piano, that's a skill that you have that other people might need, and you can kind of use that to share it with other people through the sharing economy. All right, so here are some other ways that you could do this. It says here in the article, have an unused room or apartment. Rent it to tourists on Airbnb. An unused room is just a room that's empty, or you might use it for storage or to keep some things in, but if it's just sitting there empty and there's no one staying in it, That's money.
Why not use that? Yeah, make it go from unused to used.
Right.
Yeah. And there's another way that you could definitely use one of these assets you have. Want extra gas money? Give people rides with Uber or deliver food for Food Panda.
Okay.
So if you have a car, you can Uber people around, or if you have a scooter, you could deliver food for Food Panda. You can go around and pick up meals from restaurants and bring it to other people, and you get paid for that.
Exactly. All right. So we have more to talk about in our article, but let's take a quick break and we'll come back and talk about these kinds of on-demand services. All right, so we learned about a couple of sharing economy companies here. Uber, which you can drive your car or your scooter to make extra money, or if you have an unused room or apartment, you can rent it out to people or tourists. You know, it's not like a monthly rent thing. It's sort of every once in a while, a new person comes in every couple of days. It's just like new people coming in all the time.
It's more like a vacation home or kind of maybe more like a hotel room.
Right.
With that kind of where there's people coming in and out all the time. So by doing these things, you can get a lot of benefits. Providers get the most out of their possessions and users get the convenience of on-demand service, often at a much cheaper price. So it's beneficial to both parties.
That's right.
You have this idea of, well, providers, which are the people who provide the services, they get the most out of something, which means like they're using it to the most it can be used.
It's best advantage, basically.
That's right.
They're not just letting it sit and sort of get rusty or collect dust. They're getting everything they can out of it. So they're making, sort of like we're saying that they're using it to their best advantage.
That's right. Yeah. So get the most out of something. And users get that on-demand service. On-demand means like, I want it right now. I can get it right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
I want an Uber right now. I need to go here and I need to go there quickly.
Yeah,
the bus might not do that, but the Uber will.
That's why I called it. That's why I know that if I call an Uber, I can get to wherever I need to go very fast.
Yeah. So it's on demand. It's often cheaper than usual. I don't know about this in terms, I think Airbnb is starting to get a little bit more expensive.
It depends.
It depends on the kind of place that you're staying, the area that it's in. But the U-bikes are still pretty cheap.
Yeah,
those are still
15 NT for 30 minutes, I think.
Even 5 NT or something.
Yeah.
Still much cheaper than, say, maybe buying your own really fancy bike and sort of finding a place to keep it. But here is another advantage that the sharing economy offers. It's even good for the environment as it helps people lower their carbon footprint by reusing items. So instead of just using something and tossing it away and getting a new one the next time, people are putting things to use. It's sort of kind of just making things cleaner. That whole principle of reusing and recycling and that sort of thing.
I mean, the more new things you buy, the more that the people who make them have to spend energy in order to do that. So you're actually saving a lot of energy by reusing or fixing up things that you already have. There's a good case for that. And it also helps you lower your carbon footprint. This is an idea like your carbon footprint is the amount of carbon dioxide or CO2 that you produce by the things that you do, like using the power in your house or driving your car or recycling or not recycling. And it's a way of the smaller your carbon footprint is, the less harm you are doing to the environment.
Right. So, for example, if you fly for business or if you go on a lot of vacations and you fly to lots of different countries, the more you fly, the higher your carbon footprint. There's that grammar pattern again.
That's true.
The less you fly, the lower your carbon footprint. So,
yeah, and I think a lot of people don't think about flying in terms of their carbon footprint, but there are some people I know who avoid flying because of that reason.
Exactly. But that's just one example. Of course, like Kat said, there are many different examples. So the more you use your air conditioner, the higher your carbon footprint, or the higher amount of harm you do towards the environment.
That's right.
All right, so we have talked about some of the advantage of the sharing economy. Let's move on to some disadvantages. We said the sharing economy has a definite dark side. Now, what we mean by this word definite is that it's very clearly visible. The dark side, these disadvantages are easy to see, is basically what we're saying.
Yeah, it's not like anybody's arguing that they are there. They're definitely there.
Yes.
And a dark side is kind of,
disadvantage.
Yeah, disadvantages or just the bad side of something. For example, many people renting out their lodgings on Airbnb break the safety ordinances hotels have to abide by. So that means if you've got a house or an apartment or a room that you are lending out on Airbnb, that's called a lodging. So a lodging can be anything from like an entire house to a room in somebody's house, which somebody lives in and pays rent for. It's like a place to stay. You lodge yourself in there. Yeah. So the Airbnb clients will pay the provider for these temporary lodgings that they are using.
Well, what we're seeing here is that hotels, of course, have very strict rules they have to follow. The government makes sure that hotels have these rules. And one of the big reasons they have these rules is because lots of fires used to start in hotels.
That's
and
right.
People weren't able to get out and there were lots of disasters. So now hotels have these very strict ordinances to follow. Now, an ordinance basically is just another word for a law. And it's usually one that restricts an activity. So parking ordinances mean that maybe you can't park in this area, or safety ordinances means that hotels can't have people smoking in rooms or things like that.
Right, exactly. Or you have to have a fire alarm in every room, or you have to have proper ventilation so people can get fresh air, that kind of thing. Yeah, and they have to abide by those ordinances. So abide by here means you have to accept it, you have to obey it. Abide by, we often say it in terms of like rules or laws. They're not necessarily things that we want to obey, or things that, more like things we have to, whether we like it or not.
Exactly, which is many laws. I mean, we would do lots of things if we could, but we have to abide by the law. We have to follow the law.
That's right.
All right, so that's one disadvantage of Airbnb. Another one for a different sharing economy company says shared vehicles like stand-up scooters and dockless bikes are often stolen, vandalized, or left in the wrong spots, cluttering public spaces. So this is something that we've seen with the O-bikes here in Taiwan, where they're kind of these dockless bikes. That means they don't have the sort of dock or the structure where you put them into the parking spot, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
And we do that with the U-bikes. The U-bikes sit in those sort of structures.
Yeah, they have like a row of slots that you put them in. And when you take it out, you start paying for the time. When you put it back in, you stop paying for the time.
Right.
But with O-bike, you have to use an app to do all of that.
Right. And that means they're dockless. They don't have that structure to sit in. So when people use these dockless bikes, they're more easily stolen. You might find a way around the app and just keep the bike, or they could be vandalized. Now, when something is vandalized, a person damages or destroys something on purpose. This is usually used to talk about public property, but someone could vandalize your property. So if someone painted a picture on your car or something, you could say they vandalized your car.
Yes. Yeah. So anything that's destroyed or something like that.
Right.
Anyway, so they clutter up these public spaces. Clutter is like you have a lot of things in one spot and it can look just like a big mess. It looks really ugly and it looks untidy. And I've seen some pictures of basically people who piled up dockless bikes in front of park entrances, and it's a mess. It looks very cluttered.
Okay, so obviously, there are some things that need to be taken care of, and that's why the article here says governments around the world are scrambling to regulate these companies, and some have ended up banning Uber and similar brands. Okay, so what we mean by scrambling here, this verb is basically that the government is trying to make rules, make new laws about these things, and they're trying to do it very quickly, and it's very difficult to do. So it's kind of like they're trying to get lots of different things all at the same time, and they sort of get lost while they do it.
Yeah, or they can't really keep up with the changes that are happening.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then they're trying to regulate, which means like they're trying to control this process, control the ways that the sharing economy is growing, control the ways that people can pay for things or how they can stay safe, because you want to make sure that people are staying safe and that people are getting paid for the things that they're sharing, that they're not being taken advantage of by different companies.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so we've seen that they've even gone so far as to ban some companies, but that's not a long-term solution. So it says here the solution, economists say, is for policymakers, that's the lawmakers, the people in government, companies like Uber, like Airbnb, Lime, Bird, and consumers, that's the people who use them, that's us, the shoppers, alike to do their homework. Now, what we mean by do your homework is to learn about a company, study the company, kind of look at information. Is the company doing things well? Are they hurting people?
Yeah.
Should I use them? Should I not use them?
Yeah. Make yourself informed, do some research, be aware of what you are doing.
Right.
Yeah. So, and responsible regulations, cooperation, and flexible planning, the article says, are needed to make the sharing economy work as part of the overall economic system. Yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, basically, we want to fit the sharing economy into capitalism, right? So we need to cooperate. We need cooperation. We need everyone to work together. We need laws, and we need to be flexible with how we sort of plan these companies.
That's right.
How we plan to use them in the world.
Yeah, so we want to make sure that big companies, which are less about the sharing economy, and big governments, and smaller things which are more in the sharing economy, and the small providers who take care of those possessions are able to work together. Yeah.
All right, well, let's finish up with our last line. It says, with some sensible steps from all involved, these booming new ideas can lead the way into the future. So let's just use some sense. Let's use our logic to make these things work. And these booming or growing or expanding companies
exploding
are going to be the way of the future.
That's right.
Yeah, so what we mean basically by booming is that they're growing, they're exploding, they're kind of appearing more and more like that.
Right. I keep hearing about new sharing economy apps like all the time. And so it seems like they're not going to go away anytime soon. Not at all.
Right. All right. Well, we are about finished for today. We've learned a lot about the sharing economy, and we are going to have to say goodbye now. So go out there and share.
All right. See you next time.
Bye-bye.